With over 3,000 delegates from 96 countries, the FTTH Council Europe Conference is the biggest event of its type on the planet. This conference continues to go from strength to strength on a continent where similar can be said about fibre deployment itself. I'm therefore delighted to be joined today by FTTH Council Europe President Ronan Kelly. Ronan, the stats have just come out about Europe this week, and you must be a very proud Irishman today.
Absolutely, Brian. Proud, but mixed emotions in there as well. I think it's fantastic that Ireland has finally made it onto the Fibre to the Home Council panorama. The entrance barriers onto the panorama are not necessarily the highest in the world, but it does really show a necessary investment in the country towards building out fibre infrastructure. So I'm proud that we've made it on, but given my role in Fibre to the Home Council Europe, it's somewhat of an embarrassment that it's taken us that long to get onto the panorama. That said, I am very optimistic that the level of momentum has now finally started to build. I think it took a while to get the engine started, but now that it's started, it's really just a case of building on that momentum as we go forward. If I look at some of the investments that are happening from the likes of Cyro, which is a joint venture between our national electrical utility and Vodafone, they're really starting to build momentum. Their connect rate now with customers is rising all the time. I'm very optimistic about what they're going to do in the year ahead. In a similar fashion, the incumbent Air has been kind of almost matching home for home what Cyro has been doing on the numbers so far, and my expectation is they'll continue to build on that. I think we've a lot of work to do around the National Broadband Plan. That's become a bit of a disaster over the last year or so, where two of the main respondents in there, Cyro and Air, have withdrawn out of the process. So there's only one runner left in the National Broadband Plan, which is ENET. Doesn't really make for a good competitive landscape with just one player left in there. So I think a serious rethink is needed on that front. That said, I think what we're seeing in Ireland is really being heavily influenced by what's happening across Europe in general. Some of the other big highlights that we saw on the panorama, Spain has now got to the point here where we're hosting the conference this year, where they've passed 17.5 million homes. They've gone from zero to hero in like 4 or 5 years. They've got over 6 million homes connected now at this point. So the momentum amongst the customer base is really starting to build as well with demand for these services. And I'm very optimistic we're going to see this replicated across Europe very quickly.
But growth also causes a lot of demand. How are the industry going to cope with this?
It does present a set of challenges. Quite often when we talk about countries like Portugal and Spain, we tend to talk about them, they're champions of fibre to the home, and we talk about them in the past tense like they're finished. They've done it, they've finished the build and it's move on, but they haven't. They're actually still very much in full swing and building out connectivity as we speak, and they're running at record run rates. Like if we look at the French market, for example, they're connecting 1 million homes a year. So if you take that where we've got the French market, we've got the Portuguese market, we've got the Spanish market all building out in parallel. We've now just seen with the UK market, in the last 12 months alone in the UK market, we've seen over £2 billion of investment money being announced for different operators in the UK market to go build their fibre to the home networks. So while it's fantastic that we're seeing all this growth and investment, the challenge is around supply, and supply not just on a raw material side of things, but also supply of human resources, the skilled people that can design the networks, that can build out the networks, the splicers that can do the splicing work. So we are starting to hear a few grumblings out there that there's a few pinch points emerging. So I know from speaking with the vendors here at the show that a lot of them are making the necessary investments to ensure that we don't run into pinch points as we go forward, that there will be enough supply of materials. I know a lot of them are investing heavily in training of their personnel as well, so that there's sufficient resources to keep things going forward.
And are you seeing any evidence of innovation coming into the market?
Oh, without question. There's a number of the new entrants coming into the market that are building out their infrastructures, that are adopting new methodologies with regard to network design and build out, but also as well they're using new technologies to light the fibre. So for the first time this year, one of the operators we've seen in the UK market now has started to deploy what we call XGS PON technology. So this is the first of the 10 gig PON deployments now. So really what we're starting to see, where GPON technologies have served us well for the last decade or so, we're now, because of consumer demand, starting to see operators transition over onto the 10 gig PON technologies. In a similar fashion, we're seeing technologies like NG-PON2, which can take us all the way up to 80 gig per PON with 8 different wavelengths, starting to see adoption as well by some of the larger operators around the world, particularly those that have mixed business models where they've got a mix of consumer, they've got a mix of business and enterprise, plus they've also got backhaul requirements for their mobile networks. NG-PON2 really lends itself itself well to that. That's kind of a hotbed of innovation at the moment because there's a huge focus on trying to drive cost out of that part of the industry, and a lot of success has been made in 2017. I expect as we go forward in 2018 we'll really get that much more relevant for the industry.
Yes, it looks like we've got another dynamic 12 months ahead. In the meantime, thank you for talking to us.
Without question, I think this industry never fails to surprise me with the level of innovation that goes on.